What's good, guys? Prince Sports here, coming at you with another one. They say defense wins games, but defense also wins championships too, right? That's what it's always been known. That's what it's always been said as. So I thought I'd do a list of my top 10 greatest defensive NBA players of all time. Number 10, a guy that helped build the dynasty with the San Antonio Spurs, none other than Tim Duncan himself. 8-time first team all defense, 15 times all defensive teams, period, right? It's first and second. Combine that with his ability to guard the paint, rebound, and be a big man and do his duties. Yes, Tim Duncan is one of the greatest defensive players of all time, underrated defensive player of all time, too, that never get the recognition too much for it. I know it's a shocker, right? Number 9 is the Worm, Dennis Rodman, okay? Great defensive player with the Bad Boy Pistons. Helped win 3 chips with Michael Jordan's Bulls. He's a defensive player of the year too. He got that award. But he's also been a dude that played mind games with you. He was able to guard guys 10 times bigger than him. And he was able to put the stops on them. He is one of the greatest defensive basketball players of all time. No doubt about it. Dennis Rodman went out there and did his job. Played defense. He's at number 9. Number 8 is none other than Mr. Finger Wagging himself, Mr. Mutombo. Don't bring that in my house. 4-time defensive player of the year, great defensive basketball player, one of the best to ever do it. This man was a defensive machine, and he comes in at number 8. Number 7.
That coffee down.
The big ticket, 2008 MVP. And 2008 Defensive Player of the Year, Kevin Big Ticket Garnett, okay? This guy in the 2000s was one of the best defensive players in the league. He played both ends of the floor, and he did it at a high level while being the best player on his team for the Minnesota T-Wolves, playing in the stacked Western Conference. Kevin Garnett is the 7th greatest defensive player of all time. Number 6. Woo! Ben Wallace, okay? Not once, not 2, not 3, not 4. 4 times Defensive Player of the Year. Led the league in blocks in 2002. Ben Wallace was a defensive machine, man. He was at it. He was a hard dude to score on. He shut people down. He was a great defender. Number 6 is Ben Wallace. Now we get down to the nitty gritty. Number 5 is none other than Dwight Howard. Okay, in the early 2000s, Dwight Howard was not only a franchise player, not only considered a top 5 player in the league, but he was also one of the best defensive players in the league. Matter of fact, the best defensive player in the league for most of the 2000s. The man was a force on the defensive end, okay? And good rebounder. He's at number 5 for greatest defensive players of all time. Number 4 is the Claw, Kawhi Leonard, okay? Listen, man. Kawhi not only was a franchise player, but he also was considered the best player in the world. And at the same time, he was the best defensive player in the world. He was basically the best two-way player in the world at some points in his career. And not only did he win multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards, but he also won championships by playing that stifling defense and having to be the closer too. He is one of the greatest defensive players of all time. Only problem with him is the fact that he couldn't stay healthy. He probably would be higher on this list if he stayed healthier. But he comes in at number 4 for best defensive player of all time. Number 3 is the greatest basketball player of all time, but he's also the greatest defending guard of all time. He's also the greatest 2 guard of all time. That's none other than Michael Jordan, okay? Defensive Player of the Year in the 80s, but he also played both ends of the floor. He had stifling defense, stifling schemes. He also had a defensive tactic when he would let you go past him a little bit and he'd swipe the ball from behind. Michael Jordan was one of the greatest when it comes to playing defense. He comes in at number 3. Number 2 is none other than Hakeem Olajuwon. Okay, Hakeem Olajuwon, I believe he's a multiple time Defensive Player of the Year. He guarded that paint like no other. He won MVP and the Defensive Player of the Year in the same year. He also was one of the greatest defensive players throughout his prime duration of playing basketball. He comes in at number 2. And number 1 is none other than Bill Russell himself, the greatest defensive basketball player of all time. You can't take that away from him. His defense helped guarded one of the greatest offensive basketball players of all time with Wilt Chamberlain. And Bill Russell is the greatest defensive basketball player of all time. That would never be taken away from him in recent times, despite the fact that he was a one-sided basketball player, but he was definitely elite on the defensive end. He is the greatest defensive player of all time, Bill motherfucking Russell. Sports out. Drink the coffee and make you feel better.